John, thank you for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Canada, interesting place for nuclear.
I certainly think so. Yeah.
So you've got everything from fuel to developing new technologies. What do you think makes Canada such an exciting place and such a vibrant place for nuclear right now?
Well, firstly, let me do something very un-Canadian here and just say I think we're doing everything right on the nuclear front, and there's a lot of attention being paid to Canada in terms of our overall situation, and so I'd love to speak about this topic. But to your point, yeah, we have the whole ecosystem, and I think that's interesting. We're the second largest exporter of uranium in the world, so we've got the purest deposits of uranium and large companies that are involved in producing that. We have had refurbishments going on of our existing plants for 5 years now. We're about halfway through refurbishing 10 of our CANDU, which is our indigenous technology plants. There's 10 of the 19, and they are on time and on budget for good reason, including some great collaboration between our utilities and systems operators and governments, et cetera. Fantastic nuclear laboratories, and on the basis of that ecosystem, because those refurbishments are large, right, Matthew? There's $26 billion, say 70,000 people working on it, and so a very, very strong base of expertise. And on that base, on that healthy sector, we are doing some very innovative and world-leading things in terms of small modular reactors. We can talk about that. We're deploying 2 different technologies right now. We'll be the first Western country to have a small modular reactor actually producing electricity on the grid, and there's a number of them that are being rolled out right now. And then more recently, on the heels of the small modular reactors, we've been announcing new large build technology, so building out large. And then we also have a sort of a very important global role in producing medical isotopes that we've been doing through our laboratories, as are done in other countries around the world, but now some exciting innovations with using operating reactors. So we really have we have the whole ecosystem, and I think Canada is being recognized for doing innovation and world-leading things.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you've got a tokamak at University of Saskatchewan. You've got small modular reactor public policy piece being developed out of Sylvia Frederick Center of Innovation.
Yes, that's right.
So you've got an awful lot going on.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. The traditional jurisdictions for nuclear in Canada, we have 10 provinces, and it's been Ontario and New Brunswick that have had a long history in our conventional nuclear. But what we're seeing is now other provinces, and nuclear energy generally as a provincial jurisdiction, are coming online with actual plans to deploy nuclear. And the one that you just highlighted is Saskatchewan, right, in Western Canada. And they're interesting because they're the home of our uranium deposits and some great laboratories and academic institutions. But they are, for the first time now, deploying nuclear, right? And they've started with the Westinghouse eVinci microreactor, which is being built with the Saskatchewan Research Council. I think it will be operating in the early 2030s. And they have a plan to build out the GE Hitachi BWRX, which is the same small modular reactor that is being deployed right now in Ontario. There are 4 of them being deployed in Ontario. Saskatchewan has announced that it will do another 4 or 5 of the same technology, and they're doing that in lockstep with OPG, so Saskatchewan Power, Ontario Power Generation, to de-risk the whole process. So we're seeing a pan-Canadian approach developing in our nation right now around nuclear.
And that presumably puts you as a global leader in these technologies. How do you then look to export these? How do you look to sort of get other people talking about it and excited about it as well?
What a great question. I'd say this. So we're a tier 1 nuclear nation, right? We've had nuclear for 60 years. It's been based primarily on our indigenous CANDU technology. And what we're doing right now is refreshing that technology. So AtkinsRéalis and the federal government has ownership of IP in there as well. They're refreshing the technology into a gigawatt-size reactor called the Monarch. So we have that stream going. But we've also recently seen two of our Canadian companies, Cameco, which is the uranium mining company, and Brookfield, which you've probably heard of, which is a globally recognized investment company. They bought Westinghouse. So Canadian companies now own Westinghouse as well. So you have this interesting dynamic where we've got a refreshed indigenous technology and now the capability to start potentially doing some interesting things with the Westinghouse offerings. And they've got the AP1000 on the large side, they've got the AP300 as a sort of mid-sized small modular reactor, and the eVinci, which is actually being deployed right now.
Obviously, everybody is talking about electrification and the requirement for energy or electricity to triple by 2050. Could you speak to Canada's sort of policy framework and what's happening in Canada to sort of track that and offer up more nuclear power and the steps that need to be taken to encourage policy frameworks and all those other things that need to happen to meet that requirement?
Our existing grid, if you want to look at it nationally, is about 83% non-emitting already. So that's almost the inverse of what you'd find in the States or something like that,
sure.
Right? Or these other countries where they have this, they have to sub out all of these fossil, coal and gas to clean up their existing grid, and then they have to worry about, doubling or tripling the generation that they have. And on one hand, electricity is an easier to abate type of sector, right? It's low-hanging fruit for these countries to meet their carbon reduction initiatives by working with their electricity sector, in a sense. Whereas in Canada's case, when we look to meeting our own global targets, we can't go for that low-hanging fruit of just sort of bringing in renewables and other forms of nuclear and other forms of clean electricity. Our challenge is, how are we going to decarbonize heavy industry? How are we going to decarbonize our oil and gas sector and things like that? Much harder to abate sectors, right? So we have this interesting challenge of both doubling the amount of electricity we produce, and we've got a little bit of an advantage there with an already clean grid, but then how are we going to use electrons rather than molecules to decarbonize our heavy industry? And I think that's what's been driving both the appetite for large and small nuclear, because when you get into those advanced small modular reactors, you're producing very high temperature heat, which you can use not just for electricity, but to produce hydrogen or to actually replace fossil fuels in our heavily industrial, heavy industry type economy. So those are the factors that are driving it. It's not just the need to produce more carbon-free electricity generally through conventional and new small modular reactors, but the application of small modular reactors for industrial heat purposes.
Where do you think Canada will go with their nuclear technologies and products, and who is interested in them?
Mm-hmm. Well, a growing number, domestically, a growing number of provinces are interested. So we have 2 of the 10 provinces that have had nuclear for a while. Saskatchewan, which is now deploying small and has ambitions to do large. Alberta, just west of them, which is on a very aggressive track to roll out nuclear. And then our own Canadian energy regulator saying that 9 of our 10 provinces will be employing nuclear by 2050. So there's a trajectory there. If I could give you a little bit of a ballpark in terms of our challenge, as an association, we looked at the most credible 6 national studies that have been done of our electricity grids versus what our goals are for decarbonization. And we require, just in clean baseload power, just in non-emitting baseload power, not including the intermittent sources, between 100 and 115 gigawatts of new carbon-free baseload power by 2050. So the issue in Canada is we've had a long and lucky history of having a lot of water power that's been providing that baseload non-emitting electricity, but there are no more good sources of water to go after. So if you're a country like Canada that has carbon pricing and very aggressive targets around reducing emissions, you need to bring in 115 gigawatts of non-emitting baseload. and you have no water power, your options get small. So I think that's part of the reason that there's so much recognition now of the prominent role that nuclear is going to continue to play, but to play across the rest of the country.
Exciting times for Canada.
Super exciting. Yeah, and the stakes are high though, right? I mean, we have to, as an industry, globally, but we're very focused in Canada with the realization that we have to get each of these projects right. They have to deliver as promised, and they have to be on time and on budget. The nuclear industry globally has to demonstrate that they can do that. So we're laser focused on ensuring that both the refurbishments, that the new large builds and the new small builds are done properly, so that the confidence will be there both for the investing community, for the public, and for the rest of the industry to succeed.
And if there was one thing that we should focus on and watch, what would it be and why?
Well, maybe answer that in two different ways. One is, our association's focus for this year, when we look at those 7 different issues, is workforce. So big emphasis on ensuring that we can attract and retain and develop the people who are going to be able to execute on gigawatts of build-out over the next 25 years. And then I think the other one that has to be paid a lot of attention to is the fuel ecosystem. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has caused a restructuring of the world's energy systems, and that applies to the nuclear fuel ecosystem as well. We've lost the capacity in the Western world to be doing key parts of the enrichment or producing these new fuels, which are going to be used in the advanced reactors. So we absolutely have to get that right, and I know we will, but there's a scramble going on right now, and it involves collaboration between countries.
Well, John, thank you very much for your insight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.